Good evening and welcome to the 36th episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host Lockefox, and we're going to talk about Eve news and the market. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk real quick about some show news. Again, if you like this show, please feel free to support us. Follow us at Eve Prosper. That's all you have to remember. That will get you to YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and the blog. We also post as a podcast. For everyone who wants to tune in live, we do that at 0200 on Fridays. That's Thursday night U.S. time. We're broadcasting on both Twitch and YouTube for as many people to come enjoy this as possible. I want to thank everyone who subscribes to the Patreon. It does help us produce this show. It's not a one-person effort, and your support does go a long way. Nothing is gated behind that, but it does show your support to this project, and I really do appreciate it. With that, the last thing I want to do is give a quick shout-out to the New Eden Update. They're a daily podcast during weekdays who talk about Eve news of the day. It's short, it's sweet, they're like 15 minutes long. They're doing a great job over there, and I fully support their work. And I also appreciate the shout-outs, so I figured I'd return the favor. With that, let's go ahead and move on to a quick tour of the news for the week. I was going to say that there was no news this week because the Eve community was too busy trying to see who could be the worst at shitposting, but it seems that CCP made me a liar today. They announced a pretty big one for players that their sunsetting support for XP and Vista on September 15th. These will still be supported on sort of a best effort basis, but expect more things to break and less sympathy from support if you're going to stay on those platforms. I'm not familiar with the performance for Windows 10. I know that running on Linux and Mac is a bit of a trial, but just if you're on XP, you're already kind of in a bad spot. So just keep an eye on that. Moving on. CCP announced that they're doing the Eve Euro Tour. It seems there are a bunch of events coming up in the next month or two all across Europe. So if you are one of the European fans, be sure to check out the news blog. There's Eve NT in Nottingham on September 19th. There's the official Eve player gathering in Paris on September the 21st. There's a gathering in Berlin on the 23rd. There's a gathering, Amsterdam is on the 26th and 27th, and there are going to be so many devs all over Europe, and this would be a great chance to meet any of them if you're over there. For us US guys, we got to wait until Eve Vegas, where there'll be a pretty sizable contingent of CCPers, it sounds like. I'm looking forward to CCP Quant giving a talk. And then last little piece of news is there was an article on Crossing Zebras about the economy titled The Affluent Society. I don't really have great opinions about this, and I don't want to disparage Crossing Zebras or the author. It's just that I'm super picky about economic reporting, and I think so few people actually do it right, so I'm going to keep my opinions to myself on this one. We'll see if I can do a counter blog on the blog if I ever catch up on real-life work. With that, let's go launch straight into PLEX. PLEX is on a track up. We saw it spike last week and quickly pop, and we're seeing the spike again despite rather low, somewhat low volume on PLEX. It's kind of hard to predict the behavior on this. It could do the snap again. It could continue to ease up from the 1.15 billion mark it's at right now. I think north of 1.1 is unstable at the moment, but PLEX doesn't really play by the same stability rules as everything else. So we may see it settle closer to 1.15 over the next 2 weeks, over the month of September. I expect, what I have expected in my long-term predictions is that PLEX would stay relatively stable this month. So far, that is wrong. I still want to stand by it, because if I don't, that means we could be at 1.4 billion-esque or 1.5 billion-esque by the time Thanksgiving rolls around here in the States, and that's a pretty outrageous price for PLEX. Also, that makes the price of illicit, I mean, it's if you want to know about what that does to the illicit trade, you guys should go check out Noisy Gamer's blog. He does some pretty interesting write-ups about that. But 1.5 billion ISK a month to keep playing sure seems high. $1 billion seems like a fair price. 1.1 billion seems kind of high. 1.5 seems completely out there. But if we look at the 1 year view, we're on a reasonable trajectory to get there. If we look at this as an exponential, not a linear curve. I think that we need to keep an eye on this over the weekend. This recent spike over the last day is too fast, too hot, too fast to register on our flagging. So far it didn't flag. This deviation here is not high enough. But the last 2 days might not have been enough votes to trigger the system. So keep an eye on it. I think it's high. I think it's a little too high, but it's still within the realm of stability at the moment. If you look at the other RMT tokens, we're seeing things are back into a more stable state. We saw the Resculpt certificates get up to parity with their with the PLEX conversion rate, which was a little bit weird, especially since the conversion rate isn't really 1-to-1 for that. Like, if you wanted to... The problem with the pilot's Resculpt certificates is that it requires you to turn a PLEX into Aurum and then use that Aurum to buy a Resculpt certificate to then sell. Because otherwise you waste a whole PLEX getting one Resculpting certificate if you press the buttons in the wrong order. The multiple pilot training certificate is back in a steady state. It's a little bit high on the sell orders at the moment, so if you're bought in, it's be a great chance to sell, especially if we expect this if you expect this behavior to repeat. Now is a perfect time to sell. But if you're in it for the long haul, I mean, hold on to it the same way you'd hold on to PLEX. If we look at the buy and sell prices, we can see that this very latest spike is extremely unstable. It's a pretty wide buy and sell margin, but I wasn't able to get a more accurate snapshot before the show, unfortunately. Moving on to minerals. Minerals are a little interesting this week. We're seeing a lot of the opposite behavior than what I expected. Tritanium, I had said, was going to level off right below 5.5, but it did a brief spike above up to 5.6. It's now overcorrecting down to 5.4, and it's a little hard to plot the trajectory. It really could bounce either way. We could be into more of a slide, or we could be rebounding back up to 5.5. I think the band between 5.5 and 5.4 is a stable price. So if you can get anywhere outside that band, I think you're winning. But this one's a little hard to predict where it's going. Pyerite also had a similar rise over the last week, and it's losing momentum. We saw it have a slightly higher traded volume over the last week, but that has since subsided slightly. I think the supply is catching up. This, I think, is a little bit more predictor than the Trit. I would expect where Pyerite goes, Trit should follow. Mexallon, we're seeing it still above 50 in about the 52.5 range. Looks really stable. It's still trending slightly upwards. I still have a price target of 55 on this one, but if you bought in beforehand at sub 45, this is still a good chance to sell. And without knowing what the future holds, really selling and counting your money and having not as much money later is a lot better outcome than selling now, CCP announcing that, oh no, JK, we're changing actually how we think about the recipes for Citadels, and the price coming back down and you getting nothing. So I still think it has another bump in it by the end of the year. I just don't know when, and that's highly reliant on news from the CSM Council this week. So keep an eye on, I think that's this week. It might be next week. I need to double check. Moving on to Isogen. Isogen was interesting last week, but has leveled out, staying at about the 115 mark. No reason to think it wouldn't continue to be stable. We might see some breakout action as it might trend up towards 120 again over the next week, but that's a really weak prediction. It really could go either way. Nocxium was high last week, cresting 520, but has since come falling down to about the 490 mark. I expect it to stay here. Again, it's at a spot where it could break out. We could see it bounce back up to 520, but I have a hard time believing that, especially as we look at the higher tiers of minerals. You'll see that it's really hard to justify Nocxium going up. Looking at Zydrine, we were at a high a few months ago of 1600, but we have been falling basically a straight line right down to the 1,000 mark this week. I think that it's interesting to basically have wiped out all of the added margin from the mining rebalance and the blueprint rebalance earlier in the spring, I believe. And this has hit a floor. I think 1,000 is a pretty decent floor, but we could basically do this ripple again where we climb up to 1,100, 1,150, and then fall again to 950. That's a perfectly viable prediction in the future. So if you have Zydrine, get the hell out. If you need Zydrine, I would wait. I think the prices are going to fall. I put the floor around 850, but that's a pretty low floor considering. What I think is driving this is there's more mining activity happening in Null, and despite the fact that the recipes were changed, more mining hours aggregate are being executed in Null, which is causing still there to be an oversupply of high ends, as this just eats into the hourly wage of miners. So I don't think we've hit the floor of this yet. And as activity rises through the fall and the winter, I think we're going to see this continue to fall. Megacyte is also doing a similar pattern. We saw it coming down last week, a quick recovery back to 1,800 and a dip down to 1,500. We're stable at 1,500, but I would be selling. I think we're in for another fall here. Again, I'd have to double check the recipe numbers to really figure out the hours equations to figure out what's going on. But I think Megacyte is trending down towards a 1,000 per unit price in the next 3 months. And then last, Morphite has stayed relatively stable. We saw a big dip right at the Galatea release, but we're seeing that rebound pretty quickly. Things are staying stable around 13,000. No reason to think it'll go either way, but Morphite, as you guys know, I'm bad at predicting, so that's where we are. And then last, just to look at the buy and sell margins, we're seeing a wide margin in Morphite signaling probably a price fall, maybe a price fall. A big dip in the Isogen margin, but that might just be temporary. Mexallon is showing weakness. Zydrine is still showing a decent amount of weakness. Megacyte has some strength behind it, but I think that's I think that's an anomaly, and we'll see that continue to track down. Moving on to fuel markets. Looking at fuel isotopes, we continue to see Caldari isotopes at the top, trending rather strongly. The climb has leveled off at about 900. It's going to be hard to get 900 a unit for nitrogen isotopes coming up here. And the rest of the markets are falling very slowly. Again, I think this is indicative of more mining hours being done, and the general surge in activity that comes in the fall. I think we're starting to see that. I would expect prices to keep trending, the gross trend to be down, but again, I'll sort of break that prediction in a few slides here when we talk about PI. So this might also get reflected here that there was some weakness in PI that may need to wash out. So we may see a quick dip and a rise again. Here in fuel blocks, we're not seeing anything particularly interesting. Looked like we were undervalued on Galente fuel blocks. And that looks to be corrected now. We might be slightly overvalued on Minmatar fuel blocks. Nothing much else to say there. Moving on to Outlier Analysis. We're going to start in the advanced material markets. Things are pretty quiet on the moon front. We saw a brief spike in fullerenes and hypersynaptic fibers. Not sure if those will be sustained. It looks like buy orders are coming to fill that, so there might actually be some weight behind that. We're seeing slumps in metamaterials. They're basically tracking down, and the carbides are tracking slightly up, ferrite and tungsten specifically. We'll talk about that again in a few slides. We're seeing a little bit of momentum. We're seeing a little bit of momentum in the bombers, interceptors, and heavy assault cruiser markets that might be moving some of these racial components around. So we'll get to that in just a second. If we look at fullerenes, we see this big blip. I think this is really unstable, getting up to 580. I think a price of 560 is a good high price. So we'll see in the next couple of days where that resets to. And then hypersynaptic fibers saw exactly the same behavior, where we went from a really stable 8,300 up all the way up to almost 8,900. And it's hard to justify a price over about 8,600. So if you have any of these, sell them now. Like, pause the show, log in and sell them right this second. Because this party's going to be over by Friday. Not much after this show goes up. Cadmium was the interesting one down in the moon markets. We saw it take a quick dip below 11,000, excuse me. And again, we're still within the bounds of stability, but we're in a really weak spot. It's hard to tell which way this is going to go, if this was a stockpile getting liquidated, if somebody had changed what they're producing. But cadmium's low. I kind of expect it to rebound, but I'm really bad at predicting the actual outcomes of moons here, because they tend to stay flat once they hit a price. But we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Moving on to PI, looking here at the broadcast node. I mentioned last week that we were rather weak in P4s, and broadcast nodes took a huge chunk up. It looks like somebody may have bought out the market. It also looks like we may be settling into a higher spot than we were at the 1,300-ish mark, the 1.3 million mark. I can count zeros. I think the price could be stable at 1.35 mil. I'm not sure if it'll actually stay that high. It might come crashing all the way down to 1.3. I'd buy at 1.3 if I were in the market. If I were a producer, I would sell what I have and change into something else. Self-harmonizing power cores is another one that was interesting last week. We saw it crash down to about 1.3 million per unit, and it has since rebounded. Looks like we're staying stable at the 1.55 mark, but again, that's a lot of instability, and we could see some more ripples here that might be worth making some money on. So you may be able to buy sub 1.5 and sell over 1.55. That would be sort of the play to do here. Moving down the chain to coolant, we were seeing it flatten out, but the track is back up. Almost getting to 10K a unit, but we're now at about 9.2K a unit. Looks like we're on track to hit 10K by the end of the month, so if you're producing coolant, I'd still produce coolant. Mechanical parts had seen a huge dip after the Galatea release. It looks like there may have been some stockpiling going into fueling for the Pravi invasion, and then oversupply caused the price to come down. Looks like we're tracking up above the 8.5K mark. I don't know if we're going to get all the way back up to 9K soon. I think that we may be on a stable climb up there. It just might take 3 weeks. Moving on to ships. We looked at this last week, and this will be probably the last time we pull up this particular graph. The interceptors were extremely popular with Galatea and Aegis because of Troll and Tosis modules. We saw this particularly on the Crow and the Raptor as popular platforms, with the Malediction not far behind. A lot of that action has subsided, but it's not completely gone. I don't actually have the slide I thought there. These, I think, are still worth tracking, specifically the Raptor. There are some ripples going on that might say that it's getting a more prominent doctrine role, especially as we move towards what looks like missiles. It looks like this winter's popular platform is going to be missiles. Again, a little hard to say at this point, but things are looking good. Moving on to geckos. This one I'm having a bit of a pat myself on the back thing. They went a little wild last week because Fozzie announced on the Alliance tournament stream that they were never, ever, ever going to make any more geckos, and the number that exists in the game is the maximum. They will run out until there are no more. Anyway, we saw it on a runaway course, but that trajectory has turned around in a hard way. And I'd like to reiterate the advice I gave last week, is that I think over time we're going to see the price of geckos become more expensive as things go forward. Without things changing, we should just expect to be on an upward trajectory. The art of it is going to be looking for the dips like we're seeing right now and stocking up. Now, personally, I think the geckos are far more useful as an actual utility than as a trading commodity, but ISK is ISK, and if this is what you want to make your fortune on, this is a great chance to buy in. We should be seeing some volatility as we come falling down. It has more room to fall. I think we're on target that you could pick them up for 80 mil if you. It's actually going to be hard to get them under 100 mil. So you can probably get them for 100 mil if you want to buy in there. That's probably not a bad price. It might crash through that floor though if drone doctrines continue to not be popular. So that's what I have to say about the gecko. I think this is a great chance to buy in if you want to jump in on the market. If you have them, I would not sell them. I would not sell my stockpile to get a quick billion or to turn it into a quick plex, because I think these are actually extremely useful as a utility for carriers, for heavy cruisers. I really like the gecko. I'm not selling mine, but that's because I really like geckos. Moving on to the Gila, we brought it up last week as being high, and I kind of expected it to turn around. It crested into the 275 mil mark, and I kind of expected it to come back down to 250, but it looks like we're staying high. If you can sell geckos, not geckos, Gilas, now's a great time to sell them. They're looking strong. It looks like they're in for. It looks like we're in for some upward trending. We might hit 280 mil. It's going to be hard to say. Moving on to heavy assault cruisers. I have some ideas on how to make these plots better. I just haven't had a chance to work on them. The one I'd been noting last week was the Cerberus was looking like the new king of the castle, but has since lost a little momentum. We're down in the 200 million mark range. Zealots, though, became suddenly interesting, and we'll look at that in just a second. And Ishtar's had a quick boost in price over the 200 million mark, which, if you have any Ishtars to burn, you got to go sell them now. I don't think you're going to get a better price for a long time. So if you were in the Ishtar market, if you were burned, this is the weekend to sell and get out. I don't think that window is going to stay open much longer. But if we look at the Ishtar, we're staying. The prices have been staying high for the last 2 or 3 days. Actually, that does look like a little bit of an anomaly. We were at 150. We're up in the 175 area. I think that's as good a price as you're going to get for a long time, considering the nerfs. And if you're in the market for something like a Isktar, I'd hold off for this weekend. Maybe come back next weekend. The Cerberus, again, we saw it extremely popular a few weeks ago. Dwindling, still staying over 200 mil. Popping again for Galatea, coming back down. We're now under the 200 million mark. This would be a great chance to buy in if you still think it has some legs behind it. I still think the Cerberus is a bit of an odd duck. Personally, I've had a hard time fitting it into doctrines. But that's a personal failing. I also haven't really played with a lot of the rapid missile offerings, so that's more my problem than your guys's. So if you look at the base for the Karkal, similar story. We saw it spike up to try and meet the demand for production of the Cerberus. We're seeing it dip down again. Again, a great chance to buy in for these if you need them. I don't think the prices are going to get much better. They could get a little bit better if Tritanium turns around, but we'll see what happens. Moving on, I whipped this up real quick right before the show. T3 cruisers are showing a little bit of interesting life. The Legion looks like it popped up. The Loki is strong this week, but I'm having a hard time getting behind it. The Proteus is rather strong, and the Tengu is losing ground. So, if you're in the T3 production market, Legions are hot, Lokis are hot. Proteus, I have a real hard time advocating anyone producing them, because as much as I love the Proteus, it never really seems to catch on. So, and the Tengu is down, so if you need to buy a Tengu, now's a great time to buy a Tengu. Moving on to a different. Oh no, I know what's probably driving this. The Zealot and the Amar love is probably because of the succession trials. The Zealot would probably be a pretty decent ship to be having in the Amar succession trials. So I'm changing my advice. If you're a producer, I would be looking at Tech 2 Amar stuff over the next 6 to 8 to 12 weeks. I think that we're going to see it crest and pop pretty quick once it does. But while we're still in this fuzzy spot before they announce more details about the succession trials, this would be a great chance to get in. Raptor is completely out of order. I suck at this. We saw it peak up. It's falling down. It looks like it's almost done falling, though, so this would be a good chance to buy in. If you want to speculate, I just don't think it's going to rise very high from this floor it's settling into. The Cormorant was another interesting one. We saw it rather popular a couple weeks ago, but it is dwindling in popularity. If you are in faction warfare, this continues to be a popular meta ship. Be a great chance to buy in. Another interesting loyalty point story, and this one may have popped during the show. I think this one will be over by the end of the weekend. Is Imperial Navy drone damage amplifiers. We're seeing the prices spike up despite not really having the volume to justify it. I'm pretty sure that we're going to be popping out of this high pretty soon. But if you can sell them, I would get selling them like right now. Another interesting one that looks like it was just pure speculation was the large anti-explosive pump ones. This one might have been a constriction because people trying to bet on the price of things during the succession trials, but the prices climbed astronomically during this spike, and if you bought in on this rise, I don't know how you're going to get your money back out again. We're seeing it come back down to the 7 million mark. It might crash down through that. If you can get them sub 7 million, I would buy in, waiting for the reset. There's no reason why you couldn't get 8 million out of them if you were patient, but this 10 or 12 million is just ludicrous for a price. On to the last section. We're going to do prediction review, where we look at predictions from the last week. Pilot body resculpt certificates. These didn't flag last week, so I didn't have a shiny graph for them, but they did show up in this week's flags. Again, we're seeing what looks like a constraint in supply, and the doors opened up again, but the volume is so low. We're seeing like 15 traded a day, so these ones are hard to really talk about. The Zephyr was one I brought up last week that I expected the price to come back down off of. The reason I expected them to that they went up, in my opinion, was that people thought they could use them on drifter incursions, except that drifters shoot Zephyrs. We're seeing, as the drifter incursion has been rolled back and pulled from the features, the prices are tracking down again. Now, if you're a betting person and you wanted to look like a super genius, this would be a great chance to buy in on Zephyrs to cash out on the people who didn't get the memo, but it's going to be hard to make a lot of money off of this. I have a hard time justifying the 80 million price, but it might get actually all the way back up there again. So this is an opportunity to look like a real genius. I wouldn't buy more than 5 or 6 because the volumes are pretty low, but this could be a chance to make a decent chunk of cash. Bastion modules were interesting last week. They looked like they were tracking high during the Pravi invasion. They've been settling back into their normal. I expect them actually to track down a little bit further, but I don't expect them to rebound. So I would, if you have any left over, I'd get rid of them. I don't think you're going to make any more money. The Prime A was another interesting one that I should have flagged last week, and it didn't come up. I caught the dip, not the rise. So sorry about that. I'm not sure exactly what was driving this. Again, volumes are extremely low, so it's really hard to tell you what's going on with the Prime A. Thanks again for tuning into the Eve Prosper Market Show. I've been your host, Lockefox. If you want to watch us live, you can do so on Fridays at 0200, that's Thursday night U.S. time, at Eve Prosper on Twitch and YouTube. If you want to follow the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That will get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and the blog. And if you want to support us, consider stopping by our Patreon and kicking into our tip jar there. It does mean a lot. It helps keep the show on the air. It's not free to produce. We do have some overhead producing this show, and it really does go a long way. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in live. We will be back next week on the same place, and hope to see you in game. Fly safe.